A local mental health facility has a new name after Governor J.B. Pritzker signed a proclamation yesterday here in Springfield at what is formerly named McFarland Mental Health Center. And it's really a fascinating story as to why the name has changed. Welcome back to Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's News and Talk. And, listen, mental illness is something that I think every family deals with in some capacity. Loved ones that they have maybe struggling with bouts of depression or schizophrenia or a variety of other mental health issues that can really strain relationships and families. And it's so important that families are there and that friends are there for those experiencing mental illness. And having that support structure is so important. And I think that the more we can focus on that, the better we will be in the long run. But obviously, there are a variety of different tools that have been implemented over generations that are really frightening and barbaric. And we've come a long way from, the previous centuries of how we treated those experiencing mental illness. And of course, I think there's a lot to say about the pharmaceutical industry and how they treat mental illness with all of the different drugs that there are and how people are sometimes treated like guinea pigs. There's a lot to say about all of that. There's no question. But when it comes to the facilities we have, of course, we quote, closed the asylums, so to speak, but we still have these mental health centers where people can go and have a live-in residential type of center where they can get the treatments that they need, even if it's just temporary. We also have the long-term care facilities where there's ongoing questions about how people are treated there. I know the Choate Mental Health Facility, the Developmental Disability Center down in Anna, there's a lot of focus on that and how some of the residents there are being treated. But ultimately, we have this facility that was previously to yesterday known as the McFarland Mental Health Center here in Springfield. And Governor J.B. Pritzker held a news conference there with a bunch of advocates and talked about renaming this center. And I wanted to share with you the story behind it because it's really fascinating. So here's the governor during the news conference yesterday laying out the history of a woman who is now the namesake of that center here in Springfield.
163 years ago, Elizabeth Parsons Ware Packard was incarcerated in the Illinois State Asylum by her husband without a formal determination of her mental health or a hearing, as was then permitted under Illinois law. Despite having been unequivocally and demonstrably sane, Elizabeth Packard spent 3 years imprisoned in that asylum, undergoing mistreatment after mistreatment and witnessing others subjected to the same. What false diagnosis was she given after incarceration? Well, her psychiatrist at the asylum said she is, quote, a crazy woman whose influence compared with mine is nothing. Her doctor was none other than Andrew McFarland, this facility's namesake. Before her release, Elizabeth vowed to McFarland that she would campaign for the rights of the mentally ill and would expose the asylum's culture of abuse. McFarland simply scoffed at her. Well, Elizabeth Packard did exactly what she said she would do. In 1867, she successfully advocated for and attained passage of the Bill of Protection of Personal Liberty, guaranteeing a public hearing for any person proposed to be institutionalized for what was then referred to as insanity. It won't surprise you to hear that Andrew McFarland opposed this change, fighting to maintain the status quo which allowed husbands to have their wives committed to an institution with no formal diagnosis. McFarland simultaneously campaigned against independent state inspections of mental health facilities.
So the governor talked about the facility and the need to change the name to the Elizabeth Packard Mental Health Facility from the Andrew McFarland facility, which didn't know this history at all. But a local advocate did know the history, and she started a petition drive. And we'll hear about that coming up here with Springfield's Morning News. And again, just a fascinating history. And as somebody who has a family member experiencing mental health issues and getting them help that he needs and so on, this is something that's impacting so many other families. And I think it's important we kind of do understand that we haven't always got it right throughout history, and we still probably aren't getting it right to this day. But hearing some of this history, I think is again informative and important that we delve into a bit. So we'll hear a little bit more of what the governor had to say about the renaming of a local mental health facility coming up here with Springfield's Morning. Hearing some of Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday at what is now formally known as the McFarland Mental Health Center in Springfield being changed to the Elizabeth Packard Mental Health Center in Springfield. And the governor laid out the history of Elizabeth Packard, who in the 1860s was committed by her husband despite being sane, and her actual doctor at that time was Andrew McFarland. And he later, throughout his career, history looks back and questions the tactics he used and deployed on treating people who have mental illness. The governor even talking about how in some instances people were treated in ways that would be considered now as waterboarding. But when you look back at the history of how we've treated those experiencing mental health episodes, the ideas of lobotomies, for instance, I mean, how just absolutely barbaric is that? And reminiscent of going back to the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the book and the movie with Jack Nicholson and Danny DeVito and a whole host of others. Christopher Lloyd's also in that. It's a great movie. But Nurse Ratched really implemented all kinds of just really wild treatments, electric shock and lobotomies and just a whole host of things. It's problematic. But we've come a long way. I don't think that we've fully addressed all of the harms that are being done, but I think it's still something that we need to keep in our foresight and stay focused on, because I think all of us have loved ones in some capacity or another that have experienced mental illness. But Governor Pritzker, after he laid out the history of Elizabeth Packard being institutionalized for 3 years back in the 1860s, think about that, back in the 1860s, and actually having Andrew McFarland as her doctor, who, again, history looks back not too great on, but regardless, he still was the namesake of the mental health facility here in Springfield for years. But now it's the Elizabeth Packard Mental Health Facility in Springfield. But the governor, he talked about how that came about and the history of Elizabeth Packard. And one local citizen really drove a lot of this with a petition. Here's more of what the governor had to say yesterday.
Therefore, I am proud to announce today that the Andrew McFarland Mental Health Center will hereinafter be renamed the Elizabeth Parsons Ware Packard Mental Health Center. New signage is being installed throughout the facility and around it and in the community, along with an informational plaque that will tell Elizabeth's unique but important, not so unique story. Finally, I'd like to recognize two very special people who helped make today possible. In 2021, author Kate Moore published a nonfiction bestseller that brought broad public recognition to Elizabeth Packard's story, raising awareness of the role that Dr. McFarland played in keeping her confined and maintaining the unjust status quo. Subsequently, Springfield's very own Miranda Bailey Peets went on to gather support for this name change with a petition that brought attention to this miscarriage of justice. Kate couldn't attend today's event, but Miranda is here, and I ask that we give both of them a big round of applause for their civic engagement and unrelenting advocacy.
So it's pretty cool. Miranda was there, was able to chat with her a bit, and just incredible. She started this petition on change.org and was able to actually get this across the finish line with the governor signing a proclamation yesterday. And watching that and hearing the story, it was pretty remarkable. So a lot of you out there may not have known the history of Andrew McFarland and Elizabeth Packard, but now that history is ultimately going to be highlighted every time somebody sees that sign and has a loved one at that facility here in Springfield. So just wanted to share that with you. Really just quite fascinating, no question. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. We do have a phone call coming in. Let's go ahead and grab that. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Hi. I had a situation where my grandmother was going to be admitted to McFarland if my dad and aunt didn't stay overnight at the hospital with her. And that was in the 40s or 50s.
Yeah. Regardless of what her mental capacity, was she somebody who suffered from mental illness, or was it just she was in the hospital for something else unrelated?
Well, what happened was my dad was walking home from the barber shop, and a car ran over the road and ran over what would have been my aunt. But he passed away he was 11 when that happened.
Wow.
Sad story.
Yeah, it is a sad story.
And it was just, she got depressed because she lost her child.
Which anybody would, right? There's no question. Appreciate the call. Got to take a break, though. It is Springfield's Morning News on WMAY.